It started with something so small, so ordinary, that I almost didn't notice it, until it changed everything. I was sitting on the couch one late evening, flipping through TV channels with half my attention, lost in thought about work, bills, and the usual stress that life throws at you. My sister, Emily, had just come back from visiting our parents and decided to stay over for a few days. She said the house felt too quiet lately and needed a change of scenery. We hadn't lived under the same roof since we were teenagers, so having her around again felt both strange and oddly comforting. We'd always been close. Not in the overly dramatic movie kind of way, but the quiet, dependable type. She'd always been the one who noticed when something was off with me, when I was overthinking, stressed, or hiding behind a smile. That night, she looked at me with that same concern, but there was something else in her eyes. A softness. A question. A hesitation I couldn't quite place. She laughed at something I said. I don't even remember what it was now, just a dumb joke. And as she reached out, her hand touched mine. It wasn't a casual brush or the kind of contact you forget a second later. It was intentional. Firm, but gentle. And when I looked up at her, everything shifted. She held my gaze for a moment too long. That night, I lay awake for hours. My mind raced with memories, questions, doubts. I thought back to moments that never meant anything until now. Was I blind to something all along? Was she? Or had that moment just opened a door we were never meant to walk through? I didn't know what it meant yet. I didn't know what to think, or even what to feel. But I knew one thing for sure, nothing between us would ever feel quite the same again. And that was just the beginning. What happened next made me question everything, my past, my family, even my own heart. I never imagined a moment that small could lead to a truth so big, and so impossible to ignore. The next morning, everything seemed normal on the surface. Emily was in the kitchen making coffee, humming to herself like she always used to when we were kids. The sunlight coming through the window made everything look peaceful, like the tension from the night before had just vanished with the darkness. But I knew better. I could still feel the weight of her touch on my hand, the way she looked at me. It lingered in my mind like a whisper I couldn't shut out. I tried to act like nothing had happened. Sat across from her at the kitchen table, made small talk about breakfast, the weather, old family stories. She smiled, laughed, talked like everything was fine. But every now and then, our eyes would meet, and for a second, that strange silence would come back. It was like we both felt it, but neither of us knew how to name it. Or maybe we were too afraid to. Later that day, I found myself going through old photos, trying to remind myself of who we were, two siblings who grew up under the same roof, sharing secrets, laughs, and childhood struggles. We had a bond, yes, but never anything like this. Never this strange, confusing distance that felt too close. I started to wonder if something had changed in her life that I didn't know about. She'd been more distant in recent months, not answering calls right away, skipping family dinners. When I asked her casually what had been going on lately, she hesitated. Then said she was just tired. Work was stressful. Life felt heavy. I wanted to believe that was all it was, but her eyes said more than her words ever could. There was a moment that afternoon when we were both in the hallway, reaching for something on the shelf. Our hands brushed again. She didn't pull away right away this time. Just looked at me. And again, that same quiet pause, that same unspoken tension. I began questioning myself more than anything. Was I reading too much into things? Was it all in my head? But deep down, something told me that what I was feeling was real. Something had shifted between us, even if we couldn't talk about it. Even if we didn't know how to. And yet, no matter how hard I tried to shake it off, I couldn't stop wondering, why now? What was she not telling me? And what was I afraid to admit to myself? Something was unfolding, slowly, quietly, and it wasn't just in my imagination. Over the next couple of days, that strange tension between us kept growing. We didn't talk about it, not even once, but it was always there, hovering in the quiet moments. Sometimes, I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. Other times, I'd feel her presence in a way I couldn't explain, like something had shifted between us that neither of us could undo. She stayed longer than planned. What was supposed to be a short visit stretched into nearly a week. She said she needed the break, that being in the house brought her comfort. And while I wanted to believe that, I couldn't help but wonder if she was avoiding something, or someone. Something in her eyes, in the way she moved around the house, told me she wasn't just running from stress. She was hiding from something deeper. Maybe even from herself. One night, we sat on the porch, just the two of us, wrapped in light jackets as the cool breeze swept through the trees. It should have been peaceful, like old times. But I felt this strange electricity in the air again. She started talking about the past, about how things used to be simple when we were kids, how everything felt safe back then. Her voice was soft, but there was a heaviness in it. Like she wanted to say more but couldn't bring herself to. That's when she brought up Mark, her husband. Her voice cracked a little when she mentioned his name. Said they weren't doing well, that things between them had been cold for months. I didn't know what to say. I just listened. But part of me wondered if this was connected to everything else. Was that sadness behind her eyes the reason for all this strange tension between us? Or was it just part of it? I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to push. But deep down, I could feel the walls between us shifting. The boundaries that always kept our relationship clear were starting to blur, and it scared me. Because I didn't know where this was leading, or how much further it could go before things broke completely. The next morning, she left the house without saying where she was going. Just slipped out early and didn't return until late afternoon. When she came back, she seemed quiet, distracted. Like something had happened while she was gone, but she wouldn't say a word about it. And I was left wondering again, what was she keeping from me? And why did it feel like whatever this was, wasn't over yet? The silence between us had started to feel louder than words. Emily moved through the house like a ghost, her footsteps soft, her expressions unreadable. Something inside her had shifted completely, and whatever it was, she wasn't ready to share it. I tried to act normal, tried to hold on to the idea that maybe this would all just fade away, but the air between us kept growing heavier, like we were walking closer to a line that couldn't be uncrossed. One evening, I came home from a short walk and found her in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at an old photo frame. It was a picture of us from years ago, at our cousin's wedding. We were smiling wide, arm in arm, carefree and young. I froze in the doorway for a second, unsure what to say. She didn't notice me right away. But when she did, she didn't look surprised. Just quietly placed the frame back on the table and stood up. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, they didn't look confused. They looked certain, like she had made some sort of decision. My heart started racing. There was no way to explain the feeling, but something inside me knew this moment was going to change everything. She walked past me, brushing my shoulder slightly as she moved. Not a word. Just that same soft contact that meant so much more now. I stood there for a while, trying to calm my breath, trying to slow down the storm inside my chest. But it was no use. The questions were louder than ever. That night, the tension hit its peak. We were in the living room, barely speaking. She sat across from me, her eyes focused on the floor, as if searching for the right words. I could see it in her body language, she was holding something in, something big. And then, just as I opened my mouth to ask what was going on, she interrupted me with a whisper. "I need to tell you something," she said, not looking up. I waited. My hands clenched. My mind raced through every possibility. But before she could continue, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, just one look, and her whole face changed. Her hand shook as she picked it up. One name on that screen, and suddenly she was on her feet, grabbing her bag, heading for the door. "Emily, wait, what's going on?" I asked, stepping toward her. She paused at the door. Looked back at me. And then, without a word, she left. I stood there frozen, heart pounding, mind spinning, knowing something huge was about to come to light, but not knowing what it was. The door slammed shut behind her, and for a moment, I just stood there in stunned silence. Everything in the room suddenly felt too quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. I looked down at her phone screen. She hadn't locked it before leaving. The name that had flashed across it was saved simply as M. No last name. Just an initial. And yet, something about it hit me in the gut. I knew it wasn't Mark. His name always showed up as Mark, home in her contacts. This was someone else. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling. One unread message from M. It said, "I can't wait any longer. Either you tell him or I will." The words sank deep into my chest like ice. Who was this person? What did they know? And more importantly, what did they mean by tell him? My mind started racing in every direction. Was this about me? About something I wasn't seeing clearly? Had I been missing something far bigger than just a shift in Emily's mood? I set the phone back down, heart pounding, unsure whether to wait for her or go looking. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, headlights flashed through the living room window. She was back, but not alone. I saw a man step out of the car with her. They didn't touch, but there was a strange tension between them. She seemed nervous. He seemed frustrated. I pulled the curtain slightly, just enough to see without being seen. They were talking, no, arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Her hands moved anxiously, like she was trying to explain something. He pointed toward the house. She shook her head. He looked at her one last time, then turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the driveway, wiping tears from her eyes. When she walked in, she didn't say a word. Just moved past me, straight to her room, and shut the door. I didn't follow. I needed a moment to breathe, to think. What was happening? Who was that man? Was he the one sending those messages? Later that night, when I couldn't take the silence anymore, I knocked on her door. She didn't open it. Her voice came through, shaky but firm. "Please," she said, "just give me tonight. I'll explain everything tomorrow." But that night, I barely slept. I kept going over everything. Her distance, the strange looks, the unspoken tension, and now this mystery man, this M. Had I been so focused on what was happening between us that I missed a deeper truth? Something more painful? More dangerous? And the most terrifying question of all, what if I wasn't the only one Emily was hiding something from? By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed to know the truth. Whatever it was. Because this wasn't just about family anymore. It was about betrayal, secrets, and something that felt far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I was already awake when Emily stepped out of her room. Her eyes were tired, her hair messy, like she hadn't slept either. She didn't speak right away. Just walked into the kitchen, poured herself some coffee, and sat across from me at the table. The same table where all this had started. "I owe you the truth," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the cup in her hands. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She took a long breath and finally looked up. "The man you saw last night, his name is Matthew. He's not just anyone. He's Mark's younger brother." My chest tightened. I hadn't expected that. She went on. "When things started falling apart between me and Mark, I kept it quiet. I thought it was just a rough patch. But it got worse. He stopped talking to me like a partner. Stopped seeing me. I felt invisible. Empty." Her voice cracked for a moment, and she paused before continuing. "Then one day, Matthew came over to help fix something in the house. He noticed me. actually noticed me. And I made the mistake of letting that attention feel like comfort. It all started making sense, the silence, the guilt in her eyes, the sudden visit to my house, the message from M. But something still didn't fit. He's the one who pushed me to tell you, she added. He said he was tired of secrets. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, is that I came here because I didn't trust myself anymore. I came here to get away from him. From Mark. From all of it. I finally asked, but why me, Emily? Why did it feel like something was happening between us? She looked away, eyes welling up. Because I didn't know where else to go. You were the only person who ever made me feel safe. But being close to you again, it brought up memories. Not bad ones, just complicated. Things I buried. Things I never understood. I felt like I could finally breathe, but just as the weight began to lift, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and froze. It's Mark, she said. He wants to meet. He says he knows everything. We sat in silence. The real storm was just beginning, but something had finally cracked open between us. Later that afternoon, she went to meet him. I stayed behind, unsure of what would come next. An hour passed. Then 2. And just when I started to worry, I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You think she told you everything. But she left out the part that changes everything. Call me if you want to know the truth. M." I stared at the message, heart pounding all over again. Because just when I thought the story was over, I realized I'd only heard one side. I stared at that message for a long time, unsure whether I should respond. My mind was tired, overloaded with everything I had just learned about Emily, about Matthew, about the mess that had been building silently for months. And now, this final text, offering a truth I hadn't asked for but suddenly couldn't ignore. After pacing the living room for nearly 20 minutes, I called the number. Matthew answered. His voice was calm but cold, like someone who had nothing left to lose. He didn't waste time with greetings. She told you what happened between us, right? But she didn't tell you the real reason she left Mark. My throat tightened. Go on. She didn't leave because of guilt or confusion, he said. She left because Mark found out about us months ago. He confronted her. They had a huge fight. And you know what she did? She blamed you. I froze. What do you mean, blamed me? She told him you had always been emotionally close. That you were the reason she didn't feel loved in her marriage. That her connection to you was stronger than what she had with him. She used you as a way to shift the blame. I felt a sharp, hollow ache in my chest. Everything came crashing down in that moment, the looks, the silences, the way she reached for my hand that night. It wasn't just guilt or longing. It was confusion, deflection. Maybe even desperation. I hung up without saying anything more. When Emily returned that evening, I looked at her differently. She noticed immediately. I talked to Matthew, I said. She didn't react much. Just sat down and nodded slowly. I figured you would. So, it's true? I asked. She looked tired. Yes. I said things in the heat of that fight that I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to blame you. I was just trying to protect myself. The pain in her voice felt real. But the damage was done. We spent the rest of the evening in quiet understanding. There was no yelling. No dramatic goodbye. Just two people sitting across from each other, realizing they had crossed lines they never meant to, and that things could never go back to the way they were. The next morning, Emily packed her things and left. We hugged, but it was brief. There were no promises to stay close. Just a quiet acceptance that some bonds, no matter how deep, aren't meant to be held onto forever. In the weeks that followed, I reflected a lot. About love. Loyalty. The way secrets can tear through even the strongest connections. Emily wasn't a villain. Neither was Matthew. They were just people, lost in their own pain, making choices that spiraled out of control. Sometimes, the people we trust most carry the heaviest truths. And sometimes, the lines between comfort and confusion blur in ways we never expect. This wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a story of broken trust, emotional distance, and the cost of silence. In the end, I learned that some truths hurt, but facing them is the only way to heal. 49.